So this is a tonometer that's in pretty good calibration. If you check the zero set, the probe backs up at 1 to 2 units, go forward, and it goes forward 1 to 2 units at the zero set. Also, the table is leveled, as you can see by this bubble level. The next step is to put in this calibration device. This is set on the not the middle line, but the one away from the middle line, which is for 20 units. So next you go to 20, and you try to see a similar reaction where 1 to 2 units from 20 causes the probe to move in either direction. The final step is putting it on the end mark, which tests for 60. And you look for the same movement at 1 to 2 units on either side of 60. And that's in good calibration for this device. So the middle line on this calibration device is actually for the zero set, but you can already do the zero set simply by testing the probe without any, just by turning it to zero with the probe facing forward. You can just check the zero set that way. You don't really have to use this calibration device for the zero set. The next line out is again 20, and the end one is for testing for 60 units. And the calibration device can be stored back in the case like this. So this is a tonometer that seems to stick a little bit. This is on the 20 unit setting. That was -6. It's +4 from 20. Rechecking. About -4. It's not terrible, but it seems to be sticking a little bit. So I spread a cloth napkin here so screws won't roll away. On the bottom of this, there's actually 3 screws. One is a torque size. And then there's 2 slotted screws. Now, once the bottom plate is taken off, the side pieces here don't have any screws. And so these slide off. And this exposes all the internal parts. And all I try to do here is, using a specific type of very lightweight oil, is to lubricate every place that every part touches another part. So it's sort of an intricate internal mechanism, but with both sides exposed here, I just basically lubricate everything that I can get at. This is rem oil, which is short for Remington or gun oil. When it evaporates, it leaves behind a Teflon lubricant, but it's a very lightweight oil, most of which will evaporate away, and then I blot out any excess. And so that's the process, just sort of dripping it in there at all the little points, real meticulously, and then blotting the excess dry. So places to lubricate. A drop in here. This actually pops out, a drop in there. Drop on this side. Get it that from the other side. A drop here. A drop in here. Put one along there. Drops on either side of this. Drop in there, drop in there, drop in there, and then on the bottom side to lubricate both sides of this shaft when it's on that side, and both sides of the shaft when it's on this side. Drop of lubrication there, and a drop of lubrication in this slot. It's like everything that moves. And on the underside here, holding it upside down, getting a drop in here. And then if there's any debris on the surface, this should be cleaned off as well. Now, while I've still got it open, I thought I would check its sensitivity. And here it's not even +1 from 20. Here it's -2 from 20. So, this is within plus and minus 1 to 2 on the sensitivity now. And this was achieved just by lubrication. Now, about the only tricky thing in putting it together is this bottom plate. There's a slot down the middle of this bottom plate, and this knob in the middle of this piece has to fit into that slot, so it wobbles back and forth. You just have to make sure it gets into there when you put it back together again, but it's just a matter of putting sliding the sides back together, and then lining up the bottom plate and putting the screws back in, and the lubrication process is done. I've already blotted a lot of the excess oil from the inside that I'd introduced. Okay, now it's lined up. I did lubrication on 8 different tonometers today. This one, when I would go forward with 1 unit, it would tilt forward, but I had to go backwards with 3 units, and what I finally figured out is I'd forgotten to lubricate in this space. And so I reopened it and put an extra lubrication there. Then I also did it here and here and here. And I repeated some other places too on the top here, but then when I put it back together again, it was sensitive by 1 unit in each direction. That is, I would put it at 61, it would tilt forward, and when I'd put it at 59, it would go backwards. So it was, or whichever. So there's another lubrication point here that I forgot in one case. So it's like all the possible moving parts there, and here, and here. And then you can expose some other areas by tilting it. And you want to lubricate in here. And in the mechanism in here. And then you flip it over. And there's everything that pivots, moves in here, you want to lubricate as well. So that's well as here, which moves up and down when the probe moves back and forth, as does this one. So there's lots of different places to lubricate, and sometimes if you forget one place to lubricate, it's still not to full performance. But I got a good outcome on 8 out of 8 tonometers that I felt needed relubrication. So this is the tonometer installed back on the slit lamp. It's like plus or minus 1 at the 60 mark, whereas before it was going plus or minus like 4. So just that little lubrication with the REM oil, drying everything off, putting it back together again, got a really good outcome on this calibration. Here's the 0 set. Again, plus or minus 1, whereas before it was taking much more movement of the dial to get that 0 set balance. So this version of tonometer is a little different. The bottom plate is hooked to this hanging mechanism, whereas the other one it hung from the top. So this is the version of this Haag Streit tonometer. It's held on by 3 slotted screws at the base. This screw can be removed just to make it a little easier to deal with when disassembled. And the 2 side plates don't just slide off, they're held on by 2 slotted screws both sides. So this tonometer was sticking between 2 and 7 units when I would try to check it, and after disassembly and lubrication it's now plus or minus 1. Recently I did several tonometers that were sticking by, I had it on the 60 and I had to get all the way down to about 45 before we go one direction. I had to go up almost to 80 before I went the other direction. It was really sticking a lot. And did the same disassembly, clean and lubricate, and it went back to plus or minus 1 unit. So it appears that it's just drying out of lubrication. And a lot of these that can be tremendously off on this calibration check. But this was another example of a really good outcome just by disassembly and relubrication. This version of tonometer is a little bit different for a mounting bracket in that most of the others I've been able to sort of lift off, do the work, put them back on. In this case, there is no lifting off. So what I found is the easiest way is this is a 5mm Allen wrench, and I just unscrew it here and basically turn it out until it's completely loose, holding this with one hand, and then just lift the whole bracket away. What I did similarly is I left this bracket assembly in place and just removed the 3 screws from the bottom, slid off the side plates, did the internal lubrication, dried everything off, put it back together again, and I was done. Now typically when you're doing a calibration for the 0 set, if you move it forward by 1 unit, move it back by 1 unit, that passes. Even 2 units, it passes. This one, though, is, after the lubrication process, is very smooth, that you can actually see the probe in motion throughout the entire range, plus and minus 1. You can see how it's very balanced. The movement is very fluid, whereas when I first started on it, I had to push it all the way to 2, minus 2, and sort of held it there before it moved. And then I'd go 1 or 2 in the other direction and flop the other direction. But it's not this fluid, smooth movement which this has gotten from the lubrication process. Similar fashion with the 60 calibration setting. When I first started this tonometer, it was sticking a lot. In this case, it's a very continuous fluid movement right around the 60 point, plus or minus 1. It easily moves. But when I started out, I wasn't getting any motion in this direction. I found I was getting all the way down to 51 before it flopped in one direction, and then a little over 60 to 64, it flopped in the other direction. And then just simply with disassembly, lubrication, it's now at this very fine balance at the 60 unit point for the calibration. So it's a very good outcome once again, simply from lubrication.